Okay, so Victoria and I are going to, I think, try something new and address some of the really thoughtful comments and questions that are coming up in the discussion post, but do it in a discussion format between us that everyone can sort of watch, even if it was in a different section. So there's 5 sections, and some of these are fairly complex questions, big questions, and so we wanted to sort of, because we're talking about the best way to answer them, and thought it might be more organic for you to sort of be part of that discussion with us. So what was the first one that you came across?
Probably talking about the conflicts of interest in research articles and what to take away from those.
And that's really, and I always debate the best way to explain that because it's tricky. So conflicts of interest will never go away. We're all human, we're all biased. Even if we don't have any financial conflicts of interest that we can list, we all walk around with our frame of reference and our bias. And so by confessing conflicts of interest that are financial, at least we're putting it out in the open. And that's sort of the best strategy we have at this point. So when it comes to research publications, right now it is very, very difficult to get NIH funding. We all feel the pinch. But industry groups have put a lot of money into nutrition research. And my experience has been actually very positive with the industry groups I've worked with. I've been very fortunate. So we have a study that's coming up that we're funded to do with freeze-dried strawberries. And this is sponsored by the California Strawberry Commission. So all of my publications will state very clearly that the money for the research was provided by the California Strawberry Commission. However, it's investigator initiated, which means I designed the study and proposed it. We have a contract in place that regardless of the study results, I get to publish. They don't get to change the results or the paper or say that I'm not allowed to publish it. So this is, one of the ways that we deal with conflicts of interest. The other area in which these are very much a topic of discussion are advisories and guidelines. So I have personal experience I can comment on there too. Sorry, the cursor. So I've been working on an advisor for the American Heart Association now for about 3 years. It's been quite a process, but within the committee, so there's all these rules and regulations, and so when I teach this in person, there's always the question of should we even look at these or care about them, because clearly the American Heart Association is in the pocket of pharma and it's written by pharma. So it's written by people like me, and well, actually, most of them are MDs, most of them are cardiologists. But this group gets together. We're not paid to do it. At least half of us have to have no financial conflicts of interest, major conflicts of financial interest with pharma. So I'm one of that 50% at this point in time. In the past, I wasn't. I got consulting money. But a lot of people in the group do get a lot of consulting money. If we did not allow anybody who got consulting money to participate, it would be very difficult to get people with expertise to weigh in. Because if somebody's doing a lot of research in this area and they're an expert, then pharma is going to approach them for consulting. And that's a financial conflict of interest. So the people on the committee are not the heads of pharma. They're people that with financial conflicts of interest. There are people who have been paid by pharma to give talks or to help guide their research program. But the way we deal with this is we have disclosures, and I think I at one point in the voice I'd show you the list of disclosures, and it's quite a lot.
Yeah.
It's very extensive, and I think that you might have to have a part-time person to manage all of that, the record keeping of it.
Probably.
Because there can be consequences if you don't disclose something. There can be legal action because we are required to do this. And when I was working on the advisory, I'd get these emails, every so often that I have to update my conflicts of interest, because it's not a one-time thing. At the start of the project, you say this, and then you never have to deal with it again. Every few months, I have to tell them what my financial conflicts of interest are. So that's one way that we deal with it. It's just transparency.
I think it's also to be noted too, as you're doing these advisory panels and whatnot, that you're pulling research from everywhere. So even if the people writing it have conflicts of interest, that doesn't mean all the research going into the evidence behind it necessarily has those conflicts of interest either, right?
True. But we do have a lot of research that is funded by pharma.
Yeah.
But think about it this way. So pharma's motivated to fund this research because that's how they get FDA approval.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a big study that just came out. We had to delay publication of this advisory because reduce it. This is a good case study because there was a 25% reduction in this composite endpoint of major adverse cardiovascular events in people who took a high dose of EPA versus people who had placebo and were followed for 5 years. This is a big deal. This has never happened before, that people specifically with high triglycerides treated with a high dose of omega-3 fatty acids had this significant reduction in risk. They had less death too. This is a big deal. The study was paid for by the people who make the drug. If it wasn't paid for by them, the study wouldn't have happened. NIH was not going to pay for that study. So it's sort of a practical, what are you going to do? Who's going to pay for it? Because it's going to either be the drug company who's doing it from a financial investment standpoint because they stand to make a lot of money if the results are favorable, but they're taking a huge risk because if the results aren't favorable, then it's a loss and they've paid a lot of money to do the study. Or do you expect NIH to pay for all these clinical trials? And who's going to do them? I mean, I do small clinical studies, but I don't know that I would stake my career on a 5-year follow-up of thousands of people. I'm really not qualified to do that study anyway. But it's sort of a consortium of MDs who are paid by pharma. But then we're going to write guidelines that include the results of this study. Should we exclude every MD who was part of this trial? Probably not. I mean, they're going to be the most well-versed on all the details of it. So we do the best we can with what we've got, I guess is what it comes down to, and just try to be honest and transparent because the conflicts of interest will never go away. But when I talk about in the voice thread about where it's you should note it versus where it's a red flag, there's different levels. So it's going to be really rare to find 0 conflicts of interest. But the type of conflict of interest that I would have in publishing a study of strawberry powder is that I got the money from the commission. I'm still an academic scientist. Now let's say it's a study of a dietary supplement and I'm the president of the company. I'm going to have strong financial motivation for this study to be successful in showing that my product is wonderful.
And I think one thing too is that these studies go through a peer-reviewed process too. So when I was an undergrad, I had to do research on a nutrition product, pull research articles and stuff. And I actually looked at, I can't remember what it was Sensa. So you shake these sprinkles onto your food. There's a sweet and salty version. And then because it overwhelms your sensory perception of the food, you eat less of it, was kind of my understanding of the science behind it. But you had to actually have 3 publications to back up your presentation on this product. And every single research article written on it was written by a guy that I'm pretty sure might have owned the company or was really high up in the company. And then he had published research, but none of it was peer-reviewed research. So that's a huge red flag of if you can't even go through the peer-reviewed process, you have stakes in the company, that's a huge conflict of interest that's just going to throw up every red flag out there.
Oh yeah. That's a beautiful case study. I don't think it sends us around anymore because it was disproven, right? But it was hot stuff for a while because people wanted
huge commercials everywhere on it.
Oh yeah, the marketing was great, and I think I use a krill oil example, but the quality of peer review varies too. And I know this is getting super there's a lot of factors, but that's just the reality of it. There are journals that are better than others, and a lot of them have similar sounding names, so the average person's not going to be able to figure it out. But you can go online and do a Google search and look for an impact factor, and that's a starting point. So something's published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. That means a lot versus if something's published in Alternative Medicine and Healthcare in Australia, Physiological Sciences. I don't know.
It could go on forever.
Yeah. It's funny because I pointed that out, and I don't think that I had several people comment that no one's ever pointed that out before, but now they see it. like there's exceptions obviously, but a lot of the open access journals have these really, they're getting better at like finding clever
Well,
names.
and now that I'm starting to publish, I'm realizing they're mimicking more reputable journals. So I work in the bone field, which is very specific, but they'll mimic and kind of reverse the name of a more reputable journal. So you really kind of have to dive in to separate out which one's the reputable one versus the much lower impact factor journal too.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
There's Journal of Nutrition and Nutrition Journal.
Yes.
I was like, what's Nutrition Journal? They just probably like got this typo. I thought they did it backwards. It's a different journal.
They do it intentionally. It's so confusing.
Yeah. Oh, and Melanie Hingle just sent out to the faculty that there are hijacked websites that prey on junior faculty because they have, or in different foreign countries, their English is not the first language. They have remarkably similar website names, URLs, and journal names. But it's a mimic journal. But they actually have functioning websites where you can submit and pay fees. Yeah, there's a lot of pay to publish open access journals. I mean, there's different issues. So that even if it's peer reviewed, a lot of the other times with the eager supplement companies, they'll just have a poster at a conference. A conference abstract is completely different than a peer reviewed publication. You know, you can basically put anything in an abstract and get it accepted at a conference. That doesn't mean anything to me. It's the peer reviewed publication. What journal, you know.
And it gets trickier as you get further in because impact factors are very relative to how big your field is. So, you know, I've taken a lot of biostats classes, and as you can imagine, there's not a lot of biostat specific journals. So like my professor was telling me, you know, a 1 or 2 impact factor in a biostats field can be actually pretty decent because you don't cite biostatistics articles a lot. So it's all very relative to how big your field is and how specific the journal is too. Yeah. So it takes a lot of time to wade through what an impact factor really means.
So, but for the sake of this class, you know, if we're distilling the things that you must take away, is that conflicts of interest exist. They should be disclosed. If anyone's trying to hide their conflicts of interest, that's bad. And that you should pay attention to them, especially when the person publishing the paper can make money from it directly. That's probably the strongest conflict of interest. Why is the head of the company the first author? Why isn't it academic researchers like us that this is what we do? You know, why isn't this impartial third party doing the research? Why does it have to be the vice president of the company or the president or whatever? You know, and also for getting information. Again, it's the financial conflicts of interest and I will directly financially profit from you believing me. Those are the ones that you have to pay the most attention to. So I do a study of strawberries. It's paid for by the California Strawberry Commission. It's still my study. You can believe me or not believe me as far as how I interpret the data and present it to you and explain it. That will not affect how much money I make. I don't get money from you believing me or not believing my results. But if I have a website and I'm, you know, disseminating nutrition knowledge and I tell you should take fish oil and then there's like a link to this product that I have financial interest in, that should mean less to you than you getting information from me on your 408 webpage where there are no sponsor links. I'm not recommending a particular product that you should go out and buy right now because I'm going to get money from it. Yeah, that's the difference, right? So I might receive money. I have received research money from Nordic Naturals, GlaxoSmithKline, Pronova Biopharma, Katie Pharma donated capsules recently. I feel like I'm forgetting things. United States Department of Agriculture supported the study that Nordic Naturals gave. And I've heard various things lately, too, that you can't trust any research done by the government, which is very strange to me.
You can trust no research whatsoever.
Yeah, who do you trust? And also, you know, if it's funded by the government, that's bad, which is really weird to me because that is the most impartial research that you can possibly get. That is the most competitive research. You know, getting NIH, USDA funding, this is a very good thing. So I'm not sure what people imagine when they think of government-funded, I gotta get my air quotes, government-funded research. Like it's politicians and doing research. I don't know. They're not doing, yeah, it's a peer review process. The politicians aren't even directly making decisions on who gets funded. We self-police a lot, you know, it's peer review. It's not perfect, but it's scientists making decisions about other scientists being able to do their research. That's government-funded research. So, I don't know. Yeah. Bias, conflicts of interest won't go away, but we should all be paying attention to it and thinking, does this person have motivation, especially financial motivation, to mislead me? That's what it comes down to. There's all sorts of creative interpretations, but of information, I guess. But is that person directly going to financially benefit from misleading you? And if the answer is yes, you probably want to look somewhere else for your information. That's kind of, yeah. And they should be very upfront about it. They should tell you right away, I will make money if you believe me and buy this product.
And I think another big thing is if you're starting to hesitate on this result seems, off or different or things like that, if you can't go out and find another paper that has similar results or similar findings or something like that, then maybe it is good to kind of weigh the facts of maybe there's not enough evidence based on this one article and don't put all your weight on it because you should be able to back up one research study probably with another unless it's brand new and they're still trying to come out with new science on it. Even then there could be flaws that we haven't seen yet. So definitely consensus in the scientific literature is kind of a key point of nutrition science, and that's why we come up with things like evidence-based guidelines of weighing the strength of the literature out there. And that's why when we looked at the peanut one, we saw like the high, medium, low evidence, which I think is another good point to kind of discuss and weigh on why do we put low evidence material in guidelines.
And that's a relatively new idea of ranking evidence and sort of having these evidence. So AHA does that for everything,
nutrition guidelines, clinical nutrition guidelines.
I think that's in the last decade that's a thing. And that is because, what should we tell people to eat and why? Let's put out there right now that whatever we tell people right now might, shift over time because that's the point of doing science is getting more evidence and changing that. But we don't want to throw up our hands and say, let's not recommend anything because school lunch programs, what are they going to be based on? So we got to do the best we can with what we've got. And ranking evidence is one way to sort of mitigate that and the damage that would be caused by putting a very strong recommendation out based on minimal evidence. So this is our guess, and this guess is based on this level of evidence. So, clinical randomized controlled trial, best level of evidence, really like the peanut allergy example. It's really difficult to argue with that. That's a really compelling study. But a lot of things will be based on, clinical judgment? Is that, I think, how they describe it? So these are people who see patients, who are prescribing medication, who see the outcomes and the impact of it on a case-by-case basis, and they're telling you what they think based on their level of expertise and experience. In some cases, that's the best you can do.
And it still provides at least some sort of guideline for us to go off of. If you're working in the clinical setting as a dietitian, physician, whatever, you get really difficult cases with multiple disease states, things like that. And at some point you have to sit down and go, what do I do with this complicated patient? And you can't say, well, there's no guidelines, so I can't do anything. So you kind of have to take, even if it's with a grain of salt, take what's out there and, at least try it to see if it's going to work for your patient, because different things work for different people. But sometimes you need, even if it's the slightest guidelines, something to go off of or something to work off of as a first try for what to do with a complicated case. And it's not always the best answer, but it's the best we got.
At least then too that really is the best, because someone asked that question and if you just say, I don't know, we don't have evidence, it's not. Yeah,
at least not a very satisfying answer.
At least the question's been asked and the experts looked at it and they told you what they were able to find. So knowing that there's not evidence to make a strong conclusion is also helpful, because then at least that that's just not out there. It's not a matter of no one's looked at it. So they looked at it, and it's a gap in the literature, or that means the research. Um, this is a complicated topic. I realize that, and when we're looking for take-home messages and things that we can test you on, it's going to be fairly obvious things. We're not going to give you a fairly, complicated situation, ask you to write an essay on it. It's just going to be about the awareness that these things exist and that we should all be paying attention to them. You don't have to have a sophisticated academic level interpretation of things. Just how to notice them and pay attention. Evaluating a journal and evaluating just potential red flags within an article, because that will arm you as an individual to know when something is misinformation or just extremely misleading and biased. Because I think that right now is one of the biggest problems we have when people are trying to figure out nutrition information, is there's so much misinformation, so much biased information. Everyone's an expert, everyone has an opinion, and everybody wants to make money. Just there's a lot going on. So that's the conflicts of interest in a nutshell, I guess.
Do you want to go on that at all?
Yeah, we'll do that separate.